Junaid Daniels never made it home from school. Captain Makona ignored the warning signs, and Detective Lillian Shaw didn't know the rot had already spread inside her own team. As bodies piled up and a mysterious red symbol marked the streets, Eldorado Park descended into chaos. But behind the silence, someone was pulling every string, and when the truth came out, no one was ready for what they found. Within hours, residents flooded social media with theories, warnings, and pleas for justice. Some believed a gang war had reached Eldorado Park. Others were convinced it was a message meant for someone who hadn't received it yet, searching for any clue that could point them toward a motive or suspect. Fingerprints were smudged, DNA inconclusive. As police investigated, they found themselves lost in a maze of confusion and contradiction. None of the victims had criminal records or known enemies. That these killings were part of a chain meant to silence certain people. Families relocated. Children were pulled out of schools. The once close community began to fray. Yet through the fear, a pattern was beginning to emerge. A stolen vehicle, found torched in a nearby field, contained blood traces and clothing fibers linked to two of the victims. It wasn't much, but it gave investigators a direction. Forensics indicated the vehicle had been wiped clean professionally. The killer or killers knew what they were doing. Others suspected a secret gang had claimed Eldorado Park as its base. The crimes were part of something deeper, more complex than anyone first imagined. Eldorado Park wasn't just under siege, it was being silently taken over. The investigators now faced a dangerous truth. They weren't just chasing criminals on the outside, there was a leak within their own walls. But pinpointing the source proved difficult. The corruption was subtle, hidden behind perfect paperwork and clean uniforms. Whoever it was knew exactly how to manipulate the system without leaving fingerprints. Whispers of a name began circulating, the Red Circle, and most troubling of all, a security video showing a suspicious vehicle near the scene of the second murder had been deleted from the system without explanation. At first, investigators believed it was a technical failure. But as more irregularities emerged, the truth became harder to ignore. Someone inside the police force was sabotaging the case. No one could say where the name came from, but its mention struck fear into conversations like a warning bell. The Red Circle wasn't flashy or loud. It moved quietly, removing those who stood in its way without a trace. No one had heard anything suspicious the night of the killings, and neighbors close to the scene insisted they hadn't seen a single unusual car or person enter the property. That kind of silence felt deliberate. Either people were too afraid to speak, or someone had gone to great lengths to erase all trace of the crime. Surveillance footage in the area had either been tampered with or conveniently malfunctioned. Whoever orchestrated the murders had done so with experience and confidence. As the crime scene was sealed and media trucks rolled in, one thing became clear. Eldorado Park was facing something far more dangerous than random violence. Fear began to take root in every conversation, every glance at a stranger, every car that drove by too slowly. Eldorado Park had always been known for its community spirit. 2 weeks after the initial murders, a local grocery store owner was gunned down in broad daylight. The attacker walked in, shot him 3 times, and vanished before anyone could react. No money was taken, no items stolen. The killing was clean and purposeful, just like the others. Panic began to take hold as residents realized these crimes weren't random, they were calculated. And worse, they were happening in plain sight, a place where families passed down homes and stories across generations. But in recent years, something had shifted. The once vibrant streets felt quieter. Each victim had been restrained and executed with chilling precision. There were no signs of forced entry, no stolen items, and no clear motive. The neighborhood reeled with shock. The victims came from different walks of life: a delivery driver, a part-time mechanic, and a single mother, none of them connected by family or known associations. Yet someone had targeted them with purpose. The brutality and planning behind the killings suggested the work of professionals, not petty criminals. And a sense of unease settled over the area like a thick fog. People no longer lingered at corner shops or gathered in public parks. Blue lights flashed through the streets at all hours. Checkpoints were set up, and officers were deployed in higher numbers, but their arrival brought little comfort. Many locals viewed the police as slow to respond and ineffective. Some even whispered that the force was compromised, that crime was protected from the inside. Despite their efforts, the sense of safety had already been shattered. Crimes that were once considered rare were now becoming disturbingly common. Armed robberies, drug deals, and random shootings left residents on edge, but nothing shook the neighborhood like the discovery made on a chilly Monday morning. 3 lifeless bodies were found in an abandoned home on the eastern edge of Eldorado Park. News of the murders spread fast. Police presence increased almost overnight. Investigators combed through the abandoned house. The murders at the abandoned house cast a long shadow over Eldorado Park. Then came the next blow. Theories continued to flood social media, each one more unsettling than the last. Some believed a hit list existed. The police tried to calm the public, but their statements felt hollow. Town meetings turned tense, with residents demanding protection and accountability. With every dead end, a chilling realization set in. As the investigation deepened, a new and disturbing problem surfaced. Critical evidence was disappearing. Case files went missing. Witness statements were altered. An internal review was launched quietly, with only a few trusted officers involved. Every movement was kept off the books, every conversation held in private. The investigators now faced a dangerous truth. They weren't just chasing criminals on the outside, there was a leak within their own walls. But pinpointing the source proved difficult. The corruption was subtle, hidden behind perfect paperwork and clean uniforms. Whoever it was knew exactly how to manipulate the system without leaving fingerprints. Meanwhile, the violence in Eldorado Park escalated. In a single week, 3 young men were abducted and later found alive but severely beaten. None of them spoke about what had happened. Sometimes it was hidden under bridges, sometimes scrawled on the back of a broken signpost. Always the same, a red circle with a single slash through it. His backpack was found discarded near a storm drain, but there was no trace of him. The community, already stretched to its limit, erupted. Crowds filled the streets. Angry voices demanded answers. Inside, the walls were covered with strange markings and photographs of people who had gone missing over the past 2 years. There were filing cabinets filled with handwritten notes, names, addresses, times. Hidden in one of the rooms was a locked metal door that led to a basement. There in the corner, barely conscious and shivering, was Junaid. He was malnourished, but alive. They weren't simply allies of the Red Circle, they were its architects. The gang wasn't a street-level operation. It was a web of influence, operating through fear, control, and strategic placement of loyal individuals in high-ranking positions. For years, they had turned Eldorado Park into their stronghold, using authority and silence as their most powerful weapons. His story reminded everyone that the Red Circle could be fought and that silence was no longer the only option. But it had survived. And survival was the beginning of something stronger. Though the scars ran deep and the damage would take years to undo, the people of Eldorado Park no longer lived in the shadows. With the gang's leaders exposed and their network dismantled, the township reclaimed its streets. His wrists were bruised, his eyes wide with fear, but he had survived. National media descended on the township, documenting every update, every arrest, every uncovered secret. A new task force was assigned to Eldorado Park, this time working directly with residents. Safe houses were created for witnesses willing to come forward. Graffiti that once symbolized fear was painted over by local youth initiatives. Street corners that had been battlegrounds were now watched by community patrols. Trust, while fragile, began to grow again. New information revealed that the Red Circle had not only manipulated the local drug trade and extortion rackets, but had also used their influence to steer public funds through fraudulent community projects. What appeared to be a gang war had actually been a carefully managed operation for wealth, power, and territorial control. For the first time, the crisis had a face: young, innocent, and missing. It wasn't just a string of crimes anymore. It was a command center, a place where surveillance was planned, targets were selected, and operations were mapped. In one room, police found a whiteboard with scribbled codes, symbols, and police call signs. But the most damning discovery was a collection of classified documents, police files, internal memos, and investigation updates that had never been released. These files proved what many feared. The gang was not only watching the police but receiving real-time information from someone with access. It was personal. A high-ranking officer had been feeding information to the Red Circle for months, maybe years. The leak had crippled investigations from the inside, ensuring the gang stayed a step ahead. As word of the rescue spread, the neighborhood erupted again, not with anger this time, but with hope. The nightmare wasn't over, but the illusion of invincibility surrounding the gang had finally cracked. It was a signal, not just to the community, but to the police. Someone was watching, and no one was untouchable. Eldorado Park transformed into the epicenter of the largest coordinated crackdown the area had ever seen. The evidence recovered during the rescue of Junaid Daniels unlocked a chain reaction. Within 72 hours, law enforcement executed simultaneous raids across multiple locations. They recovered illegal firearms, fake identification documents, and hidden caches of untraceable cash. More importantly, they made arrests, dozens of them. A woman claimed she had seen a boy being dragged into a dilapidated house on Dobson Street, a property long abandoned and rumored to be cursed. The team acted fast. They couldn't afford another delay, another failure. No backup was called. They moved in silently, weapons drawn, expecting resistance. But what they found inside was something else entirely. They refused to give names, locations, or even hint at who had taken them. Their silence said more than words ever could. Fear had silenced them completely. It became clear that this was a warning, a show of power from whoever controlled the streets. The same red circle symbol, now known by residents as a mark of the gang, was found spray-painted near each location where violence had occurred. Public confidence in law enforcement crumbled. Protests began to form. Cries for justice echoed through the streets, louder than the sirens that had become background noise. And through all of it, the gang moved silently, their faces unseen, their names unknown. The deeper the police dug, the more invisible their enemies became. Eldorado Park wasn't just suffering from crime, it was being controlled by it. And with every passing day, the line between law and lawlessness grew thinner. The atmosphere in Eldorado Park reached a breaking point when a 14-year-old boy named Junaid Daniels vanished on his way home from school. As the protests grew, a tip reached the task force working in secret. The house was dark and rotting, its windows broken and covered in grime. The house was more than just a hideout. The truth couldn't be hidden any longer. In the days that followed the raid on the Dobson Street house, among those taken into custody were people no one had suspected: respected business owners, a school administrator, and most shockingly, a retired police captain. The unmasking of the network stunned the country. With the community finally witnessing justice in motion, a slow rebuilding process began. Junaid's survival became a symbol of resistance. Eldorado Park had faced a storm and emerged forever changed. But it had survived, and survival was the beginning of something stronger.